Good afternoon and good morning, good evening. Welcome to this next webinar within the layer webinar series that we have started a while back already. Today we are honored to have Ludio with us. So Ludi Gomes is a poultry veterinarian. He's from Brazil. And Ludio has 20 years of experience as a veterinarian in the poultry health and production industry. So he's been working with parent stock, broilers, hatcheries. So he worked as a poultry technical manager for several animal health companies in Latin America and Asia Pacific area. And currently he is working as a technical manager for Vaccinova, Asia Pacific. He's based in Bangkok, Thailand, and that is the location from which he will be presenting to us today about vaccination and poultry diseases in layers. Ludio, floor is for you to shortly introduce yourself and say hi to the attendees.
So hi everybody, so it's good to be here. Thank you first of all to W Nutrition for the invitation. I think we have a good opportunity now to discuss the reason why I put this, like why the vaccine fails sometimes. So basic questions, and I am bringing more and more information for the daily basis, for the practical perspective. So crossing what experience that I had also in Latin America, mostly in Brazil, in working here in Southeast Asia. So
Ludio will be start the presentation in a few minutes. Just some explanation on how this works for those that are new to the webinar series. At the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A icon, and that is where you can post questions. These questions will be addressed in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, or if we are able, my panelist, my co-panelist and myself, if we are able to answer these questions during the webinar, we will do so. Any question that is really important to have Ludio answering it, or a question that is of general interest to the audience, we will address it in the Q&A session in the last 10-15 minutes of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, there will be a poll. So we ask you to take 1 minute of your time to leave to tell us how you experienced the webinar, so we can use this for future improvements of our webinar series. Explain that I will be functioning as a panelist, and I will do so together with my colleague Rituraj Patil. Rituraj, please introduce yourself.
Hi all. My name is Rituraj Patil. I'm working as a product manager for phytogenic liquids at EW Nutrition Germany. So presently I'm based in Germany, and I have completed my master's in veterinary medicine and MBA in international business. So I have a total 15 years of experience in poultry and international business. So as Ton has mentioned, during this webinar, I will be in the wings and answering your questions and supporting if any way needed. So thanks, Ton. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I realized that I forgot to properly introduce myself. I'm Twan van Gerwen. I am a poultry veterinarian, 20 years of industry experience. I've worked in the nutritional R&D as well. And now I am leading the global technical team for EW Nutrition. And I am here from the Netherlands today, where I reside. Now, Ludio, please, you can start your presentation and enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Twan, for the presentation. So we go for today for some issues that's related to animal health, for poultry diseases, particularly for layers. we focus on respiratory outbreak because it's still the main. So together with enteric problems, respiratory is one of the main problems that we face mostly in Asia Pacific area. So, and it is this what went wrong, because most of the places they come to me and say, I'm doing everything, but I'm still facing some outbreaks in my farm. And so this is just outline of my presentation. We start for talk about the poultry resistance, where it feels challenging. And so the poultry has changed for the last couple of years, changing a lot actually. How to strengthen the poultry health. So some key highlights that we're going to use for it. Vaccination, what is the critical point for bringing it to the practical perspective, what we are doing on a daily basis, and what is should do, what should not do, and conclusion. But we start for the conclusion, so we start from the back, because usually when I go to farms, they are complaining about the disease that is already there. So you don't sometimes you don't have too much tools to solve, because they are already facing, and what you see is a kind of hot potato. People try to blame the vaccines, blame the application, blame the weather. They are blaming everyone, and chickens you never understand this. So the problem continue on the farm. So apparently we are improving the biosecurity. I see many companies, so key accounts, they are improving, they are putting a lot of effort to improve the biosecurity. But why diseases are still popping up? Why they're still coming? Why new diseases are popping up? If you see this this graph is showing the disease. This is one of the key accounts in Southeast Asia, showing the disease that they're facing from the 90s up to 2015. And then what we see here is so new diseases are really strongly affecting the birds. Some disease that in the 90s was not a big concern, like astrovirus. Currently this is a concern. And you see IBV, low pathogenic AI, so it's coming more and more, even though we're improving the biosecurity. One point that you have to discuss is that also the more you select, the more you see the lack of resistance in this bird. So this is what we expect to 2050 following this geneticist. So if you wait for the 2015, you see layers. See how many eggs, and at just 550 eggs, just 550 eggs at 100 weeks. It's a lot, no? It means that the performance will be pretty much good, but the resistance we expect that is gonna go down. So this is what we are afraid of. And if you check for the disease perspective, there are a couple of papers published. I'm just pointing this one from 2002, showing that the higher the performance, the lower the capability to produce antibodies. And I'm seeing many companies struggling to get titers for ND, and then they put one more vaccine, a second, a third, a fourth, and still struggling to get, for example, HI titers. But if you see in the past, so the bird, they could respond better. So there is no free lunch. So the more you improve it, you take the risk also to have less resistance. And I think also some genetics line, they're trying to do their best to have the right balance with this. But here's how we think. So we go to companies, and they are pretty much well divided in boxes. So this is nutrition, this is husbandry, genetic, poultry health. But in the reality, this never happened such isolated. Everything happens at the same time. And people who deal with nutrition have to talk with animal health guys, because it has everything to do. And what I call in between these boxes, I call no man's land. So that's when you miss all the information, and then start open doors for outbreaks. Another point is that the virus and bacteria are constantly changing. So I think the one example that you can use clearly is Marek's disease. Is one of the diseases that is most studied throughout the years. So since long time they have been studying, and what they notice is that roughly after every 20 years, the virus shifts the virulence for higher virulence, higher virulence. If you see here in 2002, we expect 2020, we're expecting to have maybe another different virus. And I'm seeing some places already facing different Marek disease, even though they are vaccinated with one or double shot of CVI vaccine for layers and for breeders. So this Marek's disease is still a huge, it's old disease, but it's huge concern. So one good example is Marek's disease outbreak that affect hardly Pakistan. And I also include here some places in Nepal, some other in Vietnam, but Pakistan it was really caught my eye because you saw huge, not only tumors lesions, but also some nervous lesions and high mortality, really high mortality. And we took those samples and we check. So don't get impressed for this slide, it's quite busy, but I just show you. So for cluster A, there is a cluster A, B, C, and D. For cluster A is basically the vaccine. What we got in these samples from there, we got, and this is the sample that we got, and then we check that there are differences in the number of amino acids. So it was clear that it's not a vaccine. And also there is we calculated a sequence of proteins, repeat sequence of proteins. So the lower the sequence, the more virulent is gonna be the virus. And we check that this virus that you got there is not only very virulent virus anymore, it was what they are calling today hypervirulent virus, which maybe we should different approach with this one. So which we're still struggling in some areas, mostly in Southeast Asia, but also this in Pakistan. So what happened with IB, for example, infectious bronchitis? So in the past, we saw a lot of different strains that are called the variants, include the 491, so on. But what we're seeing on a daily basis now, so it changed a little bit. And you see, based on these papers published, like roughly 60% they are related to QX and Q1 strain. So this is affecting massively the flocks, even though they are giving sometimes even 4 times variant vaccine. So still having a lot of big concern on IB. What we did a survey in 2019 in places like Vietnam, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Philippines. What we saw, we got this phylogenetic tree. And when you check this, the sample that we got, the positiveness, you see that most of them were related with Q1 strain. And this Q1 strain, which when you compare for the homology, is far away from they've been used in the field that was related to 793B vaccine. What we saw, not only respiratory problem, but a lot of cystic oviduct. And yes, some when the IB was affected during laying period, we saw some respiratory problem, but ultimately a lot of problem related to kidneys lesions. So why respiratory infections is so important to layers? Because just layers we see also egg drop production, and with this egg drop production, the bottom line would be like this: you start losing a lot of money. So what you have to keep in mind. So mostly of the respiratory bacteria that cause respiratory disease in poultry, they also cause some problem related to reproductive system issues. Why? Because like you can see here a normal epithelium with ciliate cells, and then when you come here, we are demonstrating with IB, they deciliate, they close, and they kill and they destroy this ciliate epithelium. And ultimately, you see this clinical signs in some rails, and that evolve to coughing, so on and so forth. inside the chicken house. But we cannot forget that the same ciliate cells that you find there, you find those ciliate cells also in all the oviduct, ovarian and oviduct, and also in kidneys. So don't forget that they like to replicate in this kind of cells. That's the reason why you face this kind of egg drop production, or sometimes misshaped eggs, or eggs with watery albumin. So, and it will depends where the virus replicated. If it replicated in a virus, replicated here in the magnum, replicated here in the uterus, they have different affection in the bird. So this seminar is not only to discuss, it's not discuss in general, but depend on the virus replicated, you have different affection. And this can happen with IB, ND, ILT, MPV, MG, you have to consider. So all these that can affect the birds and the production. And when you see the production, you see this peak down. So it's different from, this is for IB, for example, sometimes Newcastle disease. So this peak down sometimes never return to normal curve. Me-shaped eggs, watery albumin. So mostly when they affect the magnum, you see this watery albumin. So in flocks, that's roughly 30 to 35 weeks of age. And this, we can see here in the video, when I open one egg. So we also start finding some casts inside the eggs that was related to APEC E. coli, so avian pathogenic E. coli. So these two ladies, IB and APEC, they start playing. And if you add this antibiotic resistance, it's a huge problem to the birds. Why we are so strict and putting and pushing farms that they do have to vaccinate it since the first day of age? Because if you have early infection, later on, when the birds should be on the peak, you see the silent layers or internal layers. And the consequence many times will be this kind of a cystic oviduct. So the bird should be protected before going to the farm, not protected, vaccinated, sorry. So if you cannot vaccinate it there, you should vaccinate it in the box, in the farm, before the start. So this is very important to have early protection. Another key point, and I have a lot of friends from Vietnam and also from Indonesia. They have been facing a lot of problems related to low pathogenic AI. I'm talking about H9N2. This H9N2 has been causing a lot of companies to go to bankruptcy in places that I told you before. And what we see, we don't see any change in the egg itself if they are alone, if the virus is alone. But you see this huge egg drop production, 40, 45%, and never come back again. And when they necropsy the birds, the only thing that we check is ovarian hemorrhages, which makes sense because the virus like to replicate also there. But in the reality, we see this kind of a salad of disease in farms. So I like to emphasize always that never happen alone. They like to come together for the outbreaks. In this one, for example, I went, I saw this IT, MG, and infectious corages in the same bird. So, which is quite difficult to control. And I have to pick the worst one and start controlling this first. How to control? This is the question. So you have to do your homework. So this graph, I just love this graph, is showing that first, through the management by security, given a good immune system, you reduce the challenging level, okay? And then you increase the resistance throughout the vaccination. So the bottom line is you have a bird with less chance to having the disease. You work with chance. So eradication in Southeast Asia is too aggressive word. Some they can succeed and stop for a while, but times to time the virus pop up. So you reduce the chance to have a problem. So I always use this kind. So I think who saw my seminars a couple of times, the virus never respect fences. So many companies, they have the biosecurity only fencing their property, and it's never enough. So someone can pass in front of your farm with birds for discharge that are full of Mareks disease, and then through the feathers, they get the birds. So how to control H9N2 in such situation? So remember that ducks, they can have the virus for a long time with absolutely no clinical sign. So very often we see layer farms with this kind of situation and having ducks in the backyard. So you have to choose. And one of the main problems related to layers farms is that most of them, they keep multi-age farm, have this kind that they put the DOC close to the birds that have 30, 35 weeks of age. And this is a disaster. So with this, you can perpetuate any kind of a disease, mostly Mareks, for example, and IB and the vaccine disease for a long time. We did a trial in Taiwan just to show we didn't change anything. We just keep, for example, before we had all the rearing and laying period in the same area. So we just change and split this. So, and then we put the rearing and laying different areas and see the result. So you see, even for enteric problem, respiratory problem, and expenses with antibiotic before and after. So this means a lot of money regarding this, a lot of less resistant to antibiotic, and because you have to use less than. Another point that is very common to see here, the over-trusting in disinfectant, and also it's true when you talk about COVID. I see many places that people that over-trust on this, not doing the biosecurity measures. So it's very common, go to farms. I call this magic disinfection tunnel, because people go from one side, they think they are contaminated, and they think that through the tunnel they transform in SPF human. It has never happened. So also for magic sprays. So you have to do homework for isolation, so on and so forth. It's not a matter of this. There is not even one paper showing that this kind of a tunnel really works. And I ask you, how to disinfect such a condition? This is one of the conditions you see a lot of infectious coryza. How do you control this? So you have the perfect condition for everything. I know that some of you have a very modern farms, but still open farm, this kind of condition is very common. And it's not a matter of giving more vaccines. It's a matter, again, to reduce the challenge in order that the vaccine can do their job. Water chlorination is very inexpensive. It's very easy to use it, but unfortunately, people prefer to use antibiotic instead of using good water sanitation. So chlorination, people are afraid to use it. Who knows me? I'm a fan of using this. I was using even the companies, production companies that are being worked with very good result. It means that less respiratory problem. And the tolerance is very high. You see these papers published. If you want, guys, I can send also a lot of papers published showing that chickens are very resistant to high chlorination. So my recommendation, you go through at least available 5 ppm, but I do work for layers at 10 ppm of chlorine. Overtrust in the vaccine. So this is a Newcastle disease. Is still a huge concern. You know, should call Java disease since it was discovered in Indonesia. Since 1926, is still endemic in Asia. We should have more tools to control. with variable clinical signs, now different classification. You see those professors in Bangladesh, they reclassified for genotype 13, which is very important to understand. And unfortunately, the new technology, the chickens, they are not understand as something that will solve the problem. So vectors, a single-alone solution is still too risky if you have challenge. If you don't have challenge, it's okay. But if you talk to challenges from New Zealand to Vietnam, it's totally different reality. So still the old-fashioned live plus kill vaccine in yes, sometimes vector, you makes the difference. So another point is misdiagnosis or misinterpretation, or trusting too much in the lab, or using the lab as the whole new light. One point that I like also always to emphasize is MG. MG is still a huge concern in Southeast Asia. I would put in all Asia, and MS I put in all over the world. But MG, for example, people come to me that they are negative, and I just ask you, how many times did you sample? How many samples do you have that are used to sample? All these points is very important to try to control. For example, in this graph, if you sample before in the first 2 months, antibodies will be low. If you rely on antibodies will be low, but PCR positivity will be higher. So what you should do, you should collect both PCR and serology. Never rely on only one. And you see in the beginning of the infection, they have a high vertical transmission, but you still have low antibodies. That's the reason why I always emphasize the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, as my professor Paulo Lorenzo used to tell me. So the fact that it's negative doesn't mean that it's really negative. You have to go into and dig deep inside the outbreak. So how to strengthen? First, before talk about respiratory disease, you have to focus on immune response. Is this bird capable to respond? And this is the top immunosuppression disease that we see. I think they can classify in the world. Definitely the number one is what I call the ghost of mycotoxin. Why I call the ghost? Because it's there, it's caused the damage or something, but people are just not looking for, not believing on this. Followed by IBD, chikungunya, Marek's disease, real virus, and so on. Every day you have a different virus that they are reclassifying as a immunosuppression virus. And if you think that you should not talk to feed meal manager, you should just take a look at this graph. This is the titration ELISA for Gumboro disease and Newcastle disease in different treatment from 0 ppb, I talk about ppb, not ppm, of aflatoxin, up to 400 ppb. You see that the higher the mycotoxin challenge, the lower the response for serology perspective at 6 weeks of age for broilers. And we have to take care of this. Why? Because this can cause a huge damage to your farm, and sometimes you don't realize it. So what does gut health has to do with all this immune response? It has everything to do. Since gut is considered one of the biggest immune system organs, so most of the IgA is located there. The bird is eating every single day different vitamins, different everything. The gut has to deal with this. So the immune system has to be very strong. And one thing I like to always show is this one. So you see this graph, this is the age, and this is the bursa weight. So for these birds here, they just arrive and they give food and water at the same time. For this one bird right here in this line, they just wait for 24 hours. You see that the bursa weight will be quite lower. So it means that the earlier the bird get in the farm, start eating properly, eating well, available, ad libitum, the better you be the response for not only for the gut, but all the immune system. So the earlier they get, the better you be. And don't you forget the gut is part of the mouth, so mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, and most of IgA comes from this area. What we did also to cross this information in the past, when I was still working in Brazil, we did this with the support of Immunova. So it's a company that do cytometry in Brazil. So with Federal University of Paraná. And what we check, so because this company, they have a high mycotoxin problem during the high humidity season. What they did in a large scale. They compare when they use 1 kilo of mycotoxin by the per ton versus 2 kilos, which supposed to be better because the challenge not only with aflatoxin but also fumonisin was higher. So they come up with, okay, let's do a cytometry to see what is the difference for this after the vaccination with IBV and IBD. So one of the cells that were counted was CD4, so TCRV beta 1, that this cell is related to IgA. I mean, they help to formation for forming IgA. So, and ultimately you have more IgA, you have a more local protection for respiratory disease. So have a more condition for local protection. And what we see here for this 100 vaccine in 1 kilo, the vaccine plus 2 kilos and only the vaccine, you see at the 14 and 21 days of age, you see a higher amount, significant amount, higher amount of CD4 or T helper, and for this case, for example, that you ultimately produce more IgA. They give you more condition for that. So maybe for the future, you can also challenge the birds seeing this difference. Another point that is really causing stress, causing a huge immunosuppression is stress. If you stress the bird, you have a problem to response. One of the points is related, for example, with IoT. So when you give the vaccine here, there is 0, and then you see the peak of replication, positiveness, and then the virus goes down, and they stay in latency in trigeminal ganglia. So they stay there. So it's normal for the vaccine also, sometimes field virus can stay there. So if you have some stress, what happens is start having different peaks, even with the vaccination. And that's what they complain about reaction sometimes. So have a cycling, and increases the chance of the virus mutation. What we do for the vaccination, what we try to do, first of all, live vaccine are very important. Companies might make more money with a kill vaccine, but for your farm, live vaccine is far more important, if you can tell, because they block the virus since the beginning. If this blocking fail, you have a second layer of protection that will be systemic, which then kill vaccine you play a very good role. So that's the reason why I'm pretty much focused on live vaccine as well. So this paper was published a long time ago, just showing that what happened when we give a live vaccine. This is the ELISA, and this is throughout the day. We give a IB vaccine here. So for when you see the titers in the serum, I mean the blood, it takes a long time to start going up. But if you collect tears, you see a huge amount of IgA since the beginning and going up. So which is related to local protection. And actually we are not measuring this IgA, which is very important for the bird protection. And what is the gold standard vaccination for IB, for example, ND, supposed to be eye drop, because we are giving eye drop 1 per 1, and the bird, you have to wait 3 to 4 seconds. They absorb this, but the absorption will be roughly 50%, because the rest of 50% goes to the gut. That's the reason why the birds start degluting this one. So, and you can see here, following the jackwood publication, you see that the 10 days, roughly 7 to 10 days after the vaccination, you see almost 100% will be positive. But what we see on daily basis, you see daily basis, they're giving the eye drop vaccination to 4, 5, sometimes 6 birds at the same time, and they don't have time to wait for absorption. If you don't try, we struggle to training, but this happens on daily basis. So what we do, we strongly push customers for using spray vaccination. Even the hatchery, which is supposed to be at least 15 ml per day, 100 AUC. If you cannot vaccinate in the hatchery, they should vaccinate in the box, in the farm, the same time when they arrived. And there are many different methods that you can, so it's not the intention to go there. No, but there are some key points that you should go through. And also during laying period. So considering that some places, they have such high challenge that you have to repeat the vaccination also during laying period, which in this case, I like to use not less than 2 liters per 1,000 hands. And yes, it's a lot of water, but in this way you have the preening effect. The birds start preening, and then the virus, the vaccine solution goes to the eyes and nose, so on. What is the effect in the hatchery if you use 7, 14, or 21 ml? I know that many places they are really, really stubborn to use 10 ml, even though there are a lot of papers showing that they should not. For example, if you use here, if you use 7 ml, you have 71% of losses. I mean, 1.4 log. 40 ml, roughly the same, because it was the beginning was 4.3 logs, and 21 ml, you have less losses. So the bottom line is that don't be afraid to vaccinate. If you vaccinate in the hatchery, or yes, some companies, they have even the spray machine, the same that they have in the hatchery in the farm. Don't be afraid to use it to get the DOC wet. Another point that you have to emphasize is water temperature. This is showing to the hatchery, but I use for all of them. I live in Bangkok, so sometimes here is flat, 30, 33, 34 graus Celsius here. It's a lot. So if you use, for example, this was published by Jordan. If you use cold water to dilute the vaccine, let's put around what the recommendation, 2 to 8 degrees, and keep it after that in a cold environment, so you don't lose the vaccine after 2 hours. If you prepare in cold water and then you keep this vaccine in an environment that is like a room temperature, you start losing some. So remember that it's logarithmic, so it's a lot. But if you prepare in the 25 degrees water and you keep it 25, for example, or even 30 degrees, you might be giving only water to the birds. So you have to pay attention to these. This is very important, not only water temperature, but water pH, which the virus might be quite sensitive. So what we are doing with the vaccine, so let's consider this. This is the field challenge, and this is the chicken. And then we have one guy here that is called onset of immunity. So onset has to be faster than field challenge. Let's have this situation. The challenge is trying to get the chicken, and then come the onset of immunity before that. And this is really, really true for pathogens like MG. I'm seeing farms giving MG vaccine at the 3 weeks, 4 weeks of age, which for me is sometimes is really a waste of time and money, because the bird will be already positive. So if you can apply the vaccine as early as possible, it will be better, because you are protecting the bird before the challenge, and the vaccine will play the role. And one of the last slides are coming through. So, I mean, you have to adjust the vaccine homology to the challenge. This is true. So there is the tendency, this is the percent of homology, this is the percent of protection. there is a tendency that the higher the homology, the lower the protection, but sometimes you have a lower homology, but higher protection. What you have to do is try on. So not always they work at the same time. So the phylogenetic tree and homology are good stuff only as a reference, but you have to try on real life as well. And this one for ILT vaccination, I see a lot of people working me and complaining about reaction for ILT. This was published in 1999, and I think this is still used today. It's very nice to see that, for example, if you give ILT vaccine by eye drop, you have a peak very soon, roughly 90% of the bird to be positive. And then they go down. So they did the work for boosting IgA here and protect the bird, and they go down. So you don't need that much. They keep the IgA there. If you give it by water or spray, you see the lower peak in the beginning, but then it starts going up. What the hell is this going up? This going up is like no more than a rolling reaction. And that is that when the people call you that doctor, I'm seeing a lot of respiratory problem after ILT vaccination, so on and so forth. So you should use it. If you can use by eye drop, it'll be better. If you cannot use by eye drop, you can use by nose drop. Is one option. If you cannot use by nose drop, you can use also by vent brush. Okay, the last one will be by water. So in the past, the vaccine were developed, even both of them. So mostly, so for example, tissue culture is only for eye drop, for example, but were developed for individual application, not for drinking water for someone. But when the poultry business started growing, they start having the necessity to go for mass application. And then when you open doors for this recycling, and also, as you know, you can also shift the pathogenicity of some virus in the field. So individual applications is still gold standard for ILT. You need to have people enough for application. And last but not least, people are still worried about overreaction. So you have to choose what you have to do. If I'm seeing in places that the bird that has good immune system, less reaction, plus the right rate to apply the vaccine. In conclusion, so it's always uphill battle, and uphill battle. It's never easy to control. And you see that the birds, you get more sensitive. So there is no way back. So the bird, you get better, period. But more sensitive. So chickens are getting more sensitive through the time. Be aware, new disease can pop up. Viruses and bacteria are constantly changing. So add that, this will be complicated. Biosecurity, back to the basis, training. Before anything, build a strong immune system. If the chicken doesn't have a strong immune system, they cannot respond. So we are wasting your money. And vaccination can do a very job, but when you need. So I work with vaccines, and sometimes they say you don't need that much vaccination. So all you have to do is adapt to the way you're applying for. Excess of a vaccination is also quite costly. So you have to adapt and use it wisely, depending on the challenge. When it's necessary, in accordance with the challenge. This is very important. And last but not least, in a correct way. With this, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Sorry, I might stand a little bit, but we are open for questions.
Thanks, Ludio. So I will take one question here, which is talking about using the essential oil-based spray or in water can reduce ILT reaction post-shifting. And yes, ILT is generally known to have a lot of vaccine reactions when it is being used as a live vaccine, and we can have a lot of vaccine reactions, like bird can suffer from oculonasal lesions, discharges. There would be a respiratory rinse, gurgling sound. And especially if it is happening during the growing stage, also can have impact on the feed consumption. So which may also disturb the uniformity and CV percentage of the birds, which can affect on the production performance during the laying stage. So to avoid these kind of vaccine reactions, yes, we can support the birds with some immunomodulators. And if particularly essential oil based or phytomolecule based, we would suggest to use some phytomolecule based products which are coming with mucolytic activity or immunomodulation activity, like menthol or 1,8-cineol, which can support symptomatically to overcome these vaccine reactions by their good mucolytic activity and immunomodulation, which supports the bird's immunity. And it can help into prevention of negative effects of the vaccine, which can help into stabilization of feed consumption, and it also supports the bird's immunity.
I'll continue with one on nutrition. There was a question, what is the nutritional management in case of IBV, infectious bronchitis, or IBD, Gumboro, in case of poultry? So I'm focusing that answer on layers, and we know layers are quite susceptible to Gumboro disease, to use Gumboro disease as an example. And I know from experience that in an outbreak of Gumboro, it can be helpful to slightly restrict the feed intake, because the feed intake is an additional stressor for a flock during an outbreak. So not strongly restricting, but some reduction in feed allowance can help them to get through an IBD infection more easily. For IBV, I would not recommend any nutritional application, although yeah, water applications like vitamins, vitamin C, can be considered, of course, to provide some additional support.
I have one question here that what is your opinion on revaccinating live IB and D vaccines in production, or which vaccines to use and when to start and repeat? This is a good question. I like to use the people that have the standard response, like telling that every 6 to 8 weeks they should repeat the vaccination. I will tell you, depend on. So first you have to check how is the challenge on your farm, and then to use this. But if you can use this standard, people start giving the vaccination during laying period after 24 weeks of age. Sometimes they stop during the peak of a production, and they keep the interval for 6 to 7 weeks and apply. If you have huge problem with IB, try on giving spray. There are many different sprays that are doing well. So I like to give the spray vaccination during the feeding times, early morning. Chickens will be more calm. And then you go for the spray. The spray has to be silent, and they open for 2 sides, and then they go through the cage. There are many different kinds of chicken houses. So yes, you can use it. You should use it. Sometimes you need a variant strain. Sometimes you need a variant strain. For example, like Q1, depending on the habit of the challenge. That's the reason why you have to understand what is your challenge in your farm before take it. Is it really IB, or is it ND, or you're just running reaction for some IT? So first of all, before changing this, go and understand what is the challenge.
Yeah, there's a practical question about live vaccination, and if antibiotic treatment needs to be stopped at the time of live vaccination. If the live vaccination is a virus, and particularly when you apply it separately from the way how the antibiotic is being applied, so either by spray when antibiotics are done by the water, but even in general, they do not interact with each other. But it's always good practice when you apply a vaccine through the drinking water that you have the cleanest possible water to avoid any risk of inactivation of the vaccine, which is typically a virus and very sensitive to the desactivation. So if at least at the time of vaccination, which is only a short period, I would always take out antibiotics from the drinking water if vaccinating through that same route of administration. When you apply by spray, you don't have to stop antibiotic treatment.
There's one question here. In broiler breeders, how can I control the ILT reaction, which you are seeing after 45 days of the vaccination? If you're seeing the reaction for ILT, it means that the application, you're having problem. Among the vaccines, if a tissue culture, a chicken embryo, there are different reaction, but sometimes if you have a high challenge, you should go for chicken embryo vaccine. If you have a controllable challenge, tissue culture can play a good role. But as long as I know here, the challenge in Southeast Asia, for example, is quite high. They go for chicken embryo. And what they do, as I said before, first we try to use by eye drop. It's still a huge reaction, go for nose drop. And if it's still facing problem, there is one method. You can also contact me later on. There is a vent brush vaccination, which there's not that much papers published showing the protection with this, but my practical experience that is, yes, it's working fine with no clear reaction, but in the cloaca you see the vaccine take after 5 days after vaccination.
I will take one question here. It's from Dr. Rakesh Nimbalkar. Do you recommend IB and ND vaccination every 4 to 6 weeks in commercial layer and broiler breeder during lay? So, Dr. Rakesh, yes, there are some farms which follow this kind of schedule during the lay, but we don't recommend to have this kind of as a standard protocol, because it's of course also have a stress on the birds during the lay and can also have impact on the production. So it can be followed just based on the immunity check, and we can have a regular immunity check about the titers for MB and ND, especially for the breeders. We can also do it for progeny to have check on the maternal antibodies level, and if during any drop case only, we would recommend to go for a vaccination. So which help us to have a continuous monitoring on the immunity, as well as to also avoid some impact of this vaccination during the lay.
Doctor? I see some companies giving the vaccine during from 6 to 8 weeks of age, and I don't think it can be a problem for the virus replication. You do have to pay attention to the rolling reaction. Check if there is any MEG problem before that, and if there is a MEG, you increase the chance of a rolling reaction with them. So if the vaccine will be 6 or will be within 8 weeks of age, sometimes they like even to use a 5 weeks window. Depend on the challenge that they have in the farm, basically. So in some additives which we can boost your immune system, but first of all, we keep everything fine for environment and so on. As I said, the stress, they can boost the reaction as well. There is one more, just this one. I'll be fast. So any effect of we add the dose of the vaccine for ND spray vaccine, better or not? Yes, I think it's a wise question. You can add, no problem at all. You see some of the vaccines, they have a 10 by the power 4.1, 4.22. I don't see any effect of adding, especially if in the farm you have such warm water. So yes, you can use, you can even double the dose with no problem at all, for my experience so far.
Yeah, then let me, one question about what is a good interval for live respiratory virus. You would typically see that there is a recommendation not to have any other vaccination 14 days prior and 14 days after. Practically, this can be challenging. I know this, vaccine schedules are busy. So I would say if there is no severe vaccination response from the previous vaccination, that a vaccination at 10 days after the previous one is very well, can be effective, is appropriate. And but as I said, the vaccination response can sometimes occur after ILT vaccination. That should make you decide to delay the subsequent vaccination. So it is important to have some space in the vaccination schedule. And it's also good to look at compatibility of different strains or combination vaccines products. But also always ask the supplier for good documentation if combination of vaccines are working and both simultaneously having a good immunity development. And secondly, if there is a combined vaccine, and there was also a question on that today, let's say if there is too many strains in one live vaccine, let's ask critical questions about if each and one of them is able to build up specific immunity. So Ludio, you can address one final question, and then we need to move towards the end already.
There is one here. So how to identify early IB infection in less than 2 weeks of 2 weeks old chickens? I think this is a good question. Someday, if you give the vaccine, probably you will find the vaccine virus there. But people, they like to swab the trachea, and they collect kidneys, they collect the Zika tonsil, which is Zika tonsil is very important. So the virus, they like to stay there for a long time, and then you can get the PCR diagnosis. So I will not go for serology. For this case, you should collect the sample for PCR, which you can identify the virus. It's far better. So don't you forget to sample Zika tonsil. But the fact that the Zika tonsil is positive doesn't mean necessarily that the IB will be the big role causing the damage. So you have to cross this information with the outbreaks as well, if we are facing some clinical respiratory problems. Okay.
Good. We have a couple of more minutes. The poll question at the end will only take one, so there is actually room for one more question. Any Ruturaj or Ludio, you have one in mind here?
Okay, I see here one. Ludio, you mentioned that we should vaccinate for MG as early as possible. Is the bird's immune system developed enough to accommodate immunity for this before 21 days of age? Excellent question. And what about the maternal immunity deficiency? So yes, the birds, there are some papers showing also that the birds as early as 5 to 7 days of incubation, they start already sending some lymphocyte cells to some organs. So regarding if the bird is immune competent to response, or if they are capable to respond for this MG since the first day of age, yes, they can respond out well. And so you don't need to wait up to 21 days of age, which they will be already positive. There are many alternatives to use MG. So not really F strain, you can vaccinate at the first day of age, but even though some they are vaccinated because they are afraid of challenge the field, but there are some others like K strain that you can use since the first days of age with no problem at all. So remember, you have to get there before the challenge. That's the reason why. So sometimes it's not a matter of the strain, but it's a matter of occupying the space before the field challenge. What about maternity immunity interferences? No, I don't consider maternal antibodies that will be a big role for interference in this way. For this vaccine, for example, because we are talking mucosa protection for respiratory. I don't think for this one, the experience that we have given the first day, you have a huge role on this.
Thank you, Ludio. Thank you for your presentation today. And obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have to leave some of these questions, of the many questions that came in during the Q&A session, interesting questions. We have to leave them unanswered. But if your question is not answered through the entire webinar, then you can submit your questions to marketing@ewnutrition.com, and our marketing department will redirect these questions to Ludio, to myself, and to Ruturaj, so we can answer you. There is, please take 1 minute of your time at the end to answer the poll. I would like to thank you for your attendance, and hope that you attend one of the future webinars. There is more coming up soon, so please pay attention to our LinkedIn channel and our website to sign up on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tuan, and thank you, Ludio. So there was one point that one of participants was asking about the presentation. So this recording would be available on EW Nutrition webinar page. You can see this recording after a couple of days. It would be available there. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.